Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're literally unlocking the biological cheat codes to your daily life by diving deep into the neuroscience of habits and behavior change. If you've ever wanted to demystify the neurobiology behind your daily routines so you can actually optimize your performance, well, you're in the exact right place. We're going to look under the hood of your brain, exploring the specific circuits and chemicals that dictate what you do every single day. So let's start with the elephant in the room. Why is it so incredibly hard to break a bad habit? I mean, it's a universally relatable daily struggle for all of us. Making conscious, effortful choices day in and day out is just completely exhausting. You want to study more efficiently, or you really want to get better sleep, but somehow you just find yourself falling right back into the same old routines. Well, today we're going to break down exactly why your brain resists change, and more importantly, how you can start working with your biology instead of fighting against it. All right, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the brain on autopilot. Second, we'll break down the four-step habit loop. Third, we'll explore dopamine versus serotonin. And finally, we'll get into rewiring your daily routines.
Let's jump straight into Section 1, the brain on autopilot, conscious versus subconscious.
Think of your brain as having two main characters. First, you've got your decision center, biologically known as the prefrontal cortex. This is where your conscious, effortful decision-making happens. Basically, picture it as the exhausted CEO of your brain. Now, from an evolutionary standpoint, the human brain makes up only about 2% of our total body weight, but it consumes a staggering 20% of our energy. And that CEO, the prefrontal cortex, it's the biggest energy hog of them all. It works incredibly hard to process new information and make complex choices, burning massive amounts of glucose along the way. Because of this, it suffers from decision fatigue really rapidly. So, to prevent us from just totally running out of mental energy, the brain developed a brilliant delegation system. That's our second character, the habit center, or the basal ganglia. This is the realm of subconscious automatic patterns. It's your highly efficient autopilot. When a behavior is repeated enough times, your brain undergoes this process called chunking, where it packages a sequence of actions into a single automatic routine and stores it right there in the basal ganglia. When that happens, the brain's overall activity literally decreases. The CEO just passes the baton to the autopilot to save calories. Our entire goal today is to figure out how to intentionally program positive actions into this super efficient autopilot so they no longer drain your precious mental energy. Moving right along to Section 2, the four-step habit loop, breaking down behavioral cycles. Okay, so every single habit you have moves through these four rapid-fire steps. 1, the cue. 2, the craving. 3, the response. And 4, the reward. Let's bring this to life with a scenario we've all been through. Imagine you're sitting at your desk, trying to tackle a really difficult reading assignment. Suddenly, ping! Your phone screen lights up with a notification. That's the cue. Immediately, your brain generates a desire to know who messaged you. It's this underlying urge for social connection, or maybe just a brief escape from that difficult reading. That is the craving. The response is you physically reaching out, picking up the phone, and unlocking the screen. And finally, you read the message and get a momentary hit of distraction and relief. That's your reward. This whole four-step loop happens in a matter of milliseconds. But what's absolutely crucial here is that your brain is a pattern recognition machine. It logs this entire sequence. It learns that when you feel the slight stress of studying, which is the underlying context, and you see the phone light up, the cue, the fastest way to relieve that tension is to check the device. The reward closes the loop, guaranteeing that this neural pathway gets just a little bit stronger and you will inevitably do it again. Which brings us to Section 3, dopamine versus serotonin, the chemical drivers. Let's talk about the chemicals fueling this system, starting with dopamine. Dopamine is the neurochemical responsible for motivating action and driving the push toward a goal within that habit loop we just talked about. Now, a lot of people mistakenly think dopamine is the chemical of pleasure, like you get it after you do something enjoyable. But modern neuroscience reveals something way more fascinating. Dopamine is actually the chemical of desire and anticipation. When you see a cue, like that phone lighting up, your dopamine levels actually spike before you take the action. This anticipatory spike is exactly what creates the craving phase of the loop. It acts as an intense chemical motivator, compelling your brain to take action to get the reward. If you see the cue but resist taking the action, your dopamine levels literally drop below baseline, creating a physiological sense of disappointment. It's like an itch you feel absolutely compelled to scratch. That drop, that's exactly why resisting a bad habit feels so incredibly uncomfortable in the moment. Dopamine's primary job is simply to get you up and moving toward a perceived reward. So, if dopamine is the intense drive to act, what happens at the finish line? Well, that's where serotonin strips in. Serotonin is the neurochemical responsible for providing satisfaction and a sense of reward once an action is actually completed. It steps in at the very end of the loop, during the reward phase, to provide a deep, calming sense of accomplishment. It basically signals to your brain, mission accomplished, that was totally worth the effort. Where dopamine is all about wanting, serotonin is all about having or liking. And here's the thing, one of the biggest problems in modern behavioral routines, especially with digital habits like endless scrolling, is that our tech is designed to constantly trigger dopamine. It gives you endless cues and cravings without ever delivering the serotonin hit of genuine satisfaction. You're left continuously wanting but never feeling completely satisfied. Understanding this difference is absolutely vital, because a true healthy habit requires both the dopamine to initiate the action and the serotonin to peacefully close the loop so you can actually move on to your next task. Ultimately, our core objective here can be summed up in this one idea: turn effortful choices into automatic routines. By mapping out exactly how dopamine motivates us and serotonin satisfies us, we can master the science of behavioral change. We can deliberately facilitate that shift from hard, conscious decision-making in the exhausted CEO's prefrontal cortex to effortless subconscious patterns in the basal ganglia. When you automate the essential actions of your day, you free up incredible amounts of cognitive bandwidth for actual problem-solving, creativity, and deep, meaningful work. Let's put this all into practice in Section 4, Rewiring Your Daily Routines, the Practical Toolkit. All right, here is your science-backed, practical toolkit to make this happen. First, to master your habit loop triggers, you have to ruthlessly design your environment. Remember, willpower is a finite resource governed by your prefrontal cortex. Don't rely on it. Instead, alter the cues. If you want to optimize your study sessions, remove the friction for good habits and increase it for bad ones. Leave your textbook open on your desk so it's literally the first thing you see. Put your phone on silent and leave it in another room entirely. If there's no cue, there's no creating. Second, leverage dopamine for motivation using a technique called temptation bundling. This just means pairing an action you need to do with an action you want to do. For example, tell yourself you can only listen to your favorite playlist while you're reviewing flashcards or cleaning your room. You're artificially spiking your dopamine to initiate that difficult task. Third, intentionally seek serotonin to ensure the habit actually sticks. When you finish a study block, don't just immediately jump to the next stressful task. Stop. Take 30 seconds to physically check a box on a to-do list, take a deep stretch, and acknowledge the completed work. This allows the brain to encode the reward and release that satisfying serotonin. You can apply this exact same framework to improve your sleep too. Establish a wind-down routine that removes bright screens, which, as we know, are the ultimate dopamine triggers, and replace them with calming cues like reading a physical book, allowing serotonin and melatonin to gently guide you into rest. So, I've got to ask, now that you know the neurobiology of your autopilot, what habit will you rewire first? You now have the map to your brain's habit center. You understand the intricate chemical drivers of desire and satisfaction. And you have the practical tools to actively design your environment. The power to optimize your life, conserve your cognitive energy, and build better routines is literally inside your head. So take control of those neural pathways and start rewiring. Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.